right. Welcome, guys, to another episode of Nuance and Nonsense. We are here today with my friend TJ Ragsdale, a.k.a. Ragsdale Health. I met TJ in college. He's always been into health and fitness stuff and kind of trying out alternative methods. I mean, he was the first person I ever heard talking about a cold shower, years ago. And he is a former real estate bond trader turned holistic health trainer. And so he recently founded his health and fitness practice, Ragsdale Health, in a 3-month stint in Istanbul right after he quit his finance job. He currently resides between the Hudson Valley and Philadelphia, where he is full-time training clients. So welcome, TJ.
Thanks for being on our podcast. I'm super excited to talk with you. When we were visiting I think it was like when we were with Chris, they were talking about you living in Turkey. And so I started like creeping you on Instagram, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like how you just kind of spontaneously decided to stay there for a while. So I can't wait to hear more about that. We're going to start out with a few just like fun icebreaker questions, like just random funny questions. Because we kind of, on our podcast, we talk about fashion, tech, health, pop culture, music, and like self-help, psychology. And I'm sure we'll focus on health more for this podcast since that's really your expertise. But with fashion, my pop question I like to ask people is like, how would you describe your style? What is a typical like casual day, what you would wear, and what's a typical more dressed up day for you?
I would say I lean very far away from casual. So I think even on a casual day, I'm in a turtleneck. Today's a casual day.
That Steve Jobs look going on today?
Yeah, something like that. But he always had the black. I like to experiment a little with my turtlenecks. I actually think the turtleneck makes everyone look better. I think it should enter the vernacular. But anyway, the formal day is, I retired from the suit life, but I still do love wearing a suit. So sometimes I'll just go out to dinner, pop on a suit and tie. So I'd say like I'm on the smarter side of dressing. I like to look good.
I saw in one of your videos you were wearing a fancy like fur coat.
Oh yeah, I actually just had the fur on. I just filmed a video, and you probably saw that video this morning.
Yeah. The sunrise chat about sleep, I think it was.
Yeah. I just popped that up. I was actually up at 3:30 this morning because I'm on damn Istanbul time, so it was easy to film.
My next pop question is, usually I ask like, what's your favorite app that you use or your favorite technology? But since you're into health, what's your favorite app that you think has helped you with your health? Or
it'd be like a hardware as
or
well.
It can be
like a device.
Actual device, yeah.
Yeah. I was actually just going to say, I think it's got to be the Apple Watch. I think we'll get into it later. Yeah, I mean, it's just crucial, I actually wish it went deeper on a whole bunch of stuff, but the Apple Watch I'm looking at regularly. I'm tracking my resting heart rate, my heart rate variability. I like to have a log of kind of my exercise, whether it's miles walked or particular exercise data. I think this is stuff in hindsight, like having all this data. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, but I think going forward, like if you're someone who's active and you have history of that activity, you're going to have a leg up when it comes to like things like dynamic health insurance pricing going forward. So definitely the Apple Watch.
That's a really good point. I haven't even thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the new watch, Sam talked about it on a podcast, is going to like measure your glucose or something.
Oh, I think it has a blood oximeter meter or something.
Really?
It had
Big things coming.
I don't think it has the glucose, but we were talking about that recently, me and Chris, the continuous glucose monitor.
That's going to be sweet.
I bet one day they'll have that just built right in. I think it has to like go in your skin though, but yeah.
It's stats.
Every time you put on the
watch. Our next pop question is in health. what is a typical workout day routine for you and meals?
For the workout, I don't know if I have a typical, like I have stuff I tend towards, but it really depends where I am. Like when I was in Istanbul, like the gyms were pretty cheap. So, on heavy weight days, I would go in, I would do deadlifts, squats, chest press. But now that I'm up here, like I'm upstate, like I'm pretty isolated, I'm not going to drive 25 minutes to get to the gym. It's just like, that seems like sort of excessive to me. So here I'll just, do sprints on the driveway, bike up the hills, do pull-ups on the pull-up bar we built, and hit the sauna that we built also. But like my exercise stuff, it tends towards low duration, super high intensity stuff. I don't do any of kind of like the moderate duration, moderate intensity stuff. I don't jog at all. I don't do slow biking. It's either like I'm walking on the side of the barbell or, I'm sprinting or throwing around kettlebells on the side. And for eating, it's very high in animal protein, animal fat, green vegetables, and pretty low on just sugar across the board. And like, I'm pretty strict about that. Like I include fruits in that, like, eating fruit never made anyone fat, but it is pretty high in sugar. And so obviously no carbs either. I'll fast the mornings all the time. And then, as Sam knows, I'll do sort of periodic fasting every once in a while, whether it's like 2 days or 3 days. Never done longer than that, but I would like to. I think I need a comrade in misery to go past 3 days though.
Have you ever tried the keto diet? Your diet sounds keto
good.
besides the fruit.
Yeah. I mean, I think my diet effectively aligns with keto principles pretty tightly. I think maybe the place where it deviates slightly is maybe in the fats category. I think keto people they eat a shitload of fat. I don't think I eat that much fat. I think I just eat more protein. But I think keto is great for people. It's sort of like a tribe. It's like a funny little tribe or a big tribe now, the keto people. And I think it really just describes keto just describes basic ancestral eating principles. But whatever people want to call it, if it gets them to stop eating sugars, then I'm all for it.
Yeah. I do. I'm not super strict about my keto, but it's sort of keto. Like I don't measure my fat or anything, but I eat a lot of bacon and chicken wings. And
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty yummy. It takes away the McDonald's cravings. Like I used to just go and pound a Big Mac meal and get a McFlurry. So
it's tough where you are. St. Louis has got some fantastic fast food.
It does.
My next question is a really funny one, which may embarrass you, but if you could be, Chris had troubles answering this one. And just try to the first woman that comes to mind, celebrity, who would you date if you could be with any celebrity?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I can't remember her name.
That's a bad start.
I can't remember her name. She was in an episode of this design show on Netflix. You guys probably would have known of her. She's the wife of Bill Ackman, who's an activist hedge fund manager. She's got multiple master's degrees and a PhD, and she sort of works in the space that combines biological growth and architecture, which is to say she designs structures through the way that natural organisms grow, which is kind of at the intersection of those two. She's a robber baron of her industry. And for someone to match Bill Ackman's energy and enthusiasm and contrarianism, you need a huge personality. Not to mention she's absolutely gorgeous.
Her name, Karen Ann Herkovitz.
No, it's Bill Ackman's recent wife.
Neri Oxman?
Yes, that's her. She's unbelievable.
Good answer.
So you like a woman that's well-read and smart.
Yeah, I mean, I want someone who can challenge me and call me out on the endless bullshit that I spew.
Music. What's your all-time favorite song?
Oh, Jesus.
One of your favorite songs.
I don't think I have an all-time favorite song, but I really, really enjoy Dave Brubeck's Take 5.
I've never heard that.
Song. You check it out.
I'll have to listen. What has been one of your favorite self-help books or philosophy books? Anything that kind of changed the perspective of your life? What's a good book?
I think anything, well, maybe not anything because I haven't read all of it, but Stoic philosophy broadly. I started with Epictetus, which I think is opposite to most people. Most people went Marcus Aurelius to Epictetus. But the idea of Stoic philosophy really, really changed my life. When I was younger, like Sam will remember, like I was sort of like, not eclectic, but sort of just like a pariah in college. I kind of just did what I wanted and acted like I didn't care what anyone thought. But really, I did care about what everyone thought. But it was sort of just the shell I built. And now I'm not kind of that same person. I do those same things, but I'm genuinely comfortable in my skin. And the Stoic philosophy that kind of enabled that transition from like an artificial place to a genuine place was kind of like, you need to just do your own thing and not worry about the perception of the world because you can't control any of those things. And if you lead a life where you focus doggedly on things you can control and you ignore doggedly the things you can't control, you're going to be generally happy. You're going to be doing the best you can. You're going to feel like you have impact, control over the fate and the trajectory of your own life. I think a lot of the misery that people have today is integrating too much what they can't control into how they feel about themselves. So it's a little bit, I think, of a simplistic answer, but Stoic philosophy is very important for me.
Wow, that was really well said. Yeah. I've only read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Like you said, it's kind of usually people's intro. So I need to check out. How do you say his name? Epictetus. And
I think Epictetus actually. I think he taught Marcus Aurelius. I could be wrong. There's some connection there. I think
it's interesting. I feel like Stoicism is having like a resurgence right now or something. Like it's having kind of a moment in pop culture. Like I hear a lot of people that I listen to their podcasts and stuff. I hear a lot of people talking about it. But that was really well said.
Yeah, I heard Chris Williamson.
Yeah, Chris Williamson was talking about it. And then like a couple of these guys I follow who are like power lifters and fitness guys, I've heard talking about it too.
Interesting. I wonder if it's, sorry, go ahead.
I really like how you worded that, focusing on what you can control and not focusing on what you can't, because I think most of us have that messed up. I think that's why when you meet people that work out, they tend to be happier during their day because it's like at least they did the one thing that they can control in the morning.
Absolutely.
They got their focus off of some of these other things.
Absolutely. I think also that's a fantastic point. Like, people get in kind of these vortexes, like whether it's anxiety or depression. And like, that is one of the things you can't control, right? Like the least you can do for yourself to give yourself a fighting chance is just find a way to be active for 30 minutes a day, every day. Like if you continue to be stuck in the hole, there's a variety of other things you have to work out, but the bedrock that you can provide to yourself is just, get some endorphins going. Like an endorphin it's a natural chemical that the body has produced to keep you out of the depths. You gotta produce it.
Yeah, man. And I was going to say something I forgot. Oh yeah. I feel like I've talked about it maybe we talked about another podcast, but I had this realization, like, unfortunately it wasn't that long ago that I realized this, but, and I think it's kind of stoic, but like I used to grow up, and I'm sure you could relate, just being a male. I mean, females probably relate to, but that I like, if somebody disrespected me, that I had to like, you know, make them sorry for it. Right. Like I had to, it's kind of like a macho, like, oh, like I'm going to show him, right? Like he cut me off on the road. Well, I'm going to fucking cut him off and flip him off and show him he's an idiot. Like just in every aspect of life. Like
Revenge.
I remember guys DMing Shani when we first started dating, or guys like being all thirsty in her DMs. And I'm like, well, they're disrespecting me. Like, you know, and I could get angry about it. And I realized like, it's funny because I used to think that was like tough, right? It's like, oh, I have to get revenge on this guy, or I have to show him. But it's actually like so weak because, you know, I think part of Stoic philosophy is like that you have that emotion, but you don't have to act on that emotion. Like you can sit with the emotion and just, you know, and I realized like that's actually actual strength. It's like somebody walks by me on the road and spits at me and says like, fuck you. It's like, I can just go, all right, and just keep walking and be on like you said, the things I can control, you know, like my goal today wasn't to knock out this guy on, you know, on my dog walk. My goal was what, you know, X, Y, and Z. And the strength is, well, whatever anyone else does to me, I'm going to still do the things I can control. So, I don't know. I love that. And, glad you said that. So
I'm just learning to laugh at people that are, that are too, like, they're trying to control everything. And if you just learn to laugh at them instead of like having that reaction, I feel like it brings you so much more joy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's absolutely critical. I mean, if you can get to a point where, you know, any slight or any barb that's been thrown in your direction, you can just shrug off. Like that's Kevlar. I mean, you're invincible, you know, if you're focusing on the things you can control. And I mean, that is Stoic philosophy, right? You can only take offense. Offense can't be given to you. Like people can throw shit at you all day, but if none of it sticks, if it all just slides off, like you're just cruising through life. You focus on what you can, your relationships, you know, building things you're passionate about. I mean, I was the same when I was younger. I mean, I still sort of have some of that, just like this, like arbitrary machismo, you know? I mean,
yeah.
And you got to realize that you got to use that machismo, and you got to define being a man by the important things, you know, virtue, looking after those you love, providing for those you love, being ethical, and like leave all of the negative externalities in the trash.
Right. And I mean, we can even, I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit hole, but I was talking with Shani about it last night about this idea of like toxic masculinity. And to me, that's not masculinity. It's just toxic behavior. It's just toxic.
Absolutely.
Attitudes.
There's
and
all these.
I also don't think it's like specific to men, in my opinion.
There's this girl that made this video, and she's like a TikTok, and it has these like words coming up, and she's like, "Stop uplifting toxic men."
Well, it said toxic white men.
Toxic white men specifically.
Which I thought was funny,
but she didn't like say what she was talking about. Like, you know, there was no description of what is a toxic white man.
I just went on a
and it was just kind of like a thing he was doing for like clout or attention or whatever. Which, yes, there are many toxic white men out there, but I'm like, what specific event are you talking about? Because this video is not really helping anyone, it seemed like. But
well, it's just, you know, it's just the institution of toxic white masculinity, as we all know.
But it's like what you are talking about right now, I think is so much more helpful. Like we can talk about like go and shame toxic people, but if we don't talk about how to be a better person, then there's really not going to be any change, you know?
No.
So I really like, you know, what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so I kind of want to switch pace and hop into some of the questions I had. So, can you kind of give us a little bit on your background? So you grew up in New York, right? Can you just kind of tell us a little bit about, you know, what your childhood was like? Were there any signs of, I mean, I know you're a big, you know, you're really getting into soccer back then. And can you kind of just talk about, you know, how maybe some of that informed, you know, what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in suburbs of New York. I went to public school for a bit. Both my siblings were in private school from when I was young. I ultimately switched over. I went to a very, very progressive private school, which kind of shaped a lot of who I am today, which is say I sort of backlashed against that progressivism. But yeah, I played soccer all my life. It was my activity. It sort of, shaped my personality. Went to WashU where I met this gentleman. And I actually got into the school for soccer, but never showed up. I kind of lost the passion for soccer. And anyway, I think sort of kind of this fitness and health obsession in a way filled that void, but it was really sort of curiosity and learning that filled that void. It was sort of another competitive domain where I wasn't necessarily competing with others in an unhealthy way. I was just competing kind of with who I was last week and keep learning. And anyway, then I graduated and thought I wanted to be in finance. So I went and traded real estate bonds for a bit, which I really liked. I actually love finance at my core. I love finding investments that other people have not. But I just hated all the dogma of kind of that world and the hierarchy. So recently quit at the beginning of COVID and, fled to Turkey and then left on the 89th day of my 90-day visa, and I'm back.
Nice. And so you intended to go somewhere else, right? And then you had to quarantine in Turkey. Is that?
So I thought back then that I wanted to work in venture capital. So the plan was, I was getting so pissed with, governments and regulations telling us where we could and couldn't go. Like everyone was saying, I just want to wait for everything to be clear. And I was like, fuck this. Like I'm 25. Like I'm not going to wait a year for the world to make itself certain. Like I'm just going to go and work this out. And so I was going to plan to go to Turkey, quarantine there for 2 weeks, and then find a way to just slither through the Euro border. But that didn't really happen because Europe locked down again. And then I sort of fell in love with Istanbul, and then I realized I wanted to do Ragsdale Health. So I founded that business and started training clients in Istanbul on the ground, had a variety of clients, met some friends and sort of dug in a bit. But then when I founded the business, I realized that, Turkey is not the place that an American necessarily wants to build out a business. It's certainly possible, but, the currency is shitting itself. People are losing purchasing power. I don't speak their language. Their financial infrastructure is not nearly as, beneficial as ours might be. So, I had to put my business hat on and so I came back to do business here.
Cool. And then was it something in the back of your mind to create this Ragsdale Health business, or did it just kind of click into place while you were over in Europe?
Well, to be honest, dude, I kind of just started doing training as good passive income to kind of just keep me cash flow neutral in Turkey. Mm-hmm. Cause it's been something I've been obsessed with for a while. And I was just I know above average about this, and, there's minimal capital cost up front to starting a training business. I just have to convince someone to, buy into my system, and then I can show them tangible results. It seems like a win-win. But as soon as I started doing it, absolutely loved it. I love to see people progress. It's an absolute biohack, just the base level. Exercise is a biohack. It transforms your life, and people claim that they know that, but they don't, or else they would embody it. Everyone would exercise. So kind of seeing people improve tangibly day in, day out, in combination with the fact that this has always been a passion of mine, it kind of just collided. And I was like, why don't I just do this and build this out, a health business and kind of see where it goes. So, that's kind of where I'm at.
Amazing. That's really awesome. Cool. Why should we, or why should Americans, or why should people be concerned with our health?
That's a good question. Why should we be concerned? I mean, I don't know, I guess it gets down to why, what is an enriching life for people? I think we're here on this earth, we're sapient beings. We're allowed to have consciousness and, evaluate ourselves from the third person. We have all these human elements, which makes life, enjoyable, but also very complicated. But I think ultimately most people want to have a happy, enriching life. And, our genes are very old. Our genes are used to an environment where we moved a lot, and we, ate organic foods, and we fasted, and we got exposed to cold temperatures. And now we live in this great modern environment with all these pleasures, but we still have those old genes. And so you ought to exercise because the body was constructed in a way whereby if you don't exercise, you're probably not going to be happy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is kind of a depressing statistic, but suicide is so much more common in countries like the US that are, what would you call that? Civilized, like very...
Like first world countries?
First world countries,
have
countries with less poor and starving people, and you wouldn't think that. So I think that says a lot about what truly makes us happy. It's not necessarily success and these phones in our pocket that we're all addicted to, and that like a more simpler life. Maybe even like hunting our own food would make us happier. Like
for sure.
These things that we think are, and a lot of people think are awful now to do. So it really makes you rethink like everything that we prioritize when you like hear about these statistics and just see all the unhappy people. And I mean, a lot of us go through that ourselves. Like most people have dealt with depression of some sort. So, I think that like really puts into perspective, like why health is so important. And also what you were saying about helping clients and just implementing exercise and seeing their like life change. I remember I was a personal trainer for a little period of my life and at a club fitness. And I helped he was a genius. He was like a tech genius who had like I remember he was interviewing at Google. So that kind of puts into perspective that because they only interview like the best candidates.
Of course.
And he played the harp and he had really bad back pain because, he's on his computer all day. He's playing the harp all day. And I started implementing like more back exercises because I could tell his chest was really strong and tight. He had been working his chest a bunch, but not working his back at all. And within literally 1 to 2 weeks, his back pain resolved and he could play the harp without pain. And so just like that little change in someone like is like that can change their life, they're out of pain. And that's really, I'm sure you've seen things like that happen. So I think that's another reason health is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like universal that everyone wants a healthy body, healthy mind.
I also think that like on that note, like everyone does want to help, like everyone wants a really cut body, right? Like, I think that's one of like the tricky things about exercise. Like a lot of people's motivations is pretty vapid. They want to just look good, but like, I kind of view that in the same lens as I view philanthropy, right? Like whether or not your motives are virtuous and selfless, or, your motives are to make yourself feel good, the philanthropy is still happening. The result is still happening in the world, right? Like someone is getting, whether the philanthropy you're giving to is effective or not, like someone is getting money. A good thing is happening in the world. So whether your motivation for exercise is like, to have a six pack that you can flex on Instagram, or to like live a really long time so you can spend time with your grandkids, like the good thing is still happening, right? So, for a lot of people, like I say in my scope of practice, like, a lot of clients have aesthetic goals, and I don't have a problem with that. It's not my role to judge your goals. And if you look good, it's probably a proxy for good health. It's not easy.
Certainly. Yeah. I love that comparison. And So actually, this was my next question, is kind of in line with that. What are good markers of health? And I mean, there's a lot. I mean, we talked about the Apple Watch and all the metrics it can give you. When you're looking at, your own health or maybe a client's health, what are some things you look at?
Yeah, man. So I think they're like obvious markers of health that like we can see with our own eyes. Like you don't want to be obese, that's a problem. There's this body, I don't know, all bodies are equal movement happening, which is fine, I guess. But it's unhealthy to me. Like you can't be morbidly obese and be healthy. There's no new, we're on nuance and nonsense. That nuance doesn't exist. There's no nuance there.
Yeah.
Another, a little bit more maybe empirical marker of health that I really like to look at is resting heart rate. We both have our Apple Watches. That's a hard one to cheat, right? And it's an easy one to gauge. Like if on a weekly basis you have a resting heart rate that's 80 to 90, like you'll probably have a disease. Whereas if you have like 45 to 60, that's a pretty healthy marker. That indicates that you have strong muscle mass. Your heart's not working that hard to, keep your resting metabolism, and that you're generally pretty healthy. Another really strong one that's kind of been coming out of the woodwork scientifically lately is this idea of heart rate variability, which can be induced by extreme exercise. It basically says like, is your heart always beating at the same rates, or is there variability from heartbeat to heartbeat? And the Apple Watch can also sort of measure that. That's sort of a leading marker of longevity. So, I would say it ranges from simple things like, you don't want to have too much body fat. For men, you really shouldn't be above, 17%. For women, you shouldn't be above 25%. To more, esoteric stuff like, blood glucose we were talking about earlier, or heart rate variability or resting heart rate.
So the variability is bad or good?
No, you want variability.
Okay.
You want variability in your heart rate, and the way you induce that is HIIT has come into the vernacular too. Like you want to drive your heart rate up as high as you possibly can get it.
Oh, okay. So you're not talking about resting heart rate.
You're not talking about irregular heartbeat.
No.
Like that the rate varies throughout the day, and is it also like that it can recover well? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think that's
right.
High
rate to your resting rate.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's this hedge fund manager who's also a doctor, and he talks about homeostatic capacity, like your body's ability to take a stressful state and resume to homeostasis. And if you constantly are forcing your body through stressful states, it adjusts very quickly. The body is antifragile. It's built for that stuff. So if you're forcing it up to 185 beats per minute, in a minute, on a sprint, it's going to take your resting heart rate very, very, very low to respond to that stress. It's
interesting. Yeah, makes sense. I didn't really know about that.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So I was watching your video about sleep, and I really liked what you were saying about some of these, some of the most, you mentioned a few, I can't remember the names, successful people that thought out of the box, scientists and things, they would nap a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you think that, and you talk about the really this thing that no one, our culture tells us that napping and sleeping long is almost bad, and that you almost brag when you're yeah, I was working so hard. I only got 4 hours of sleep. I only sleep about 4 hours because I work so much. And you just talk about we should all be sleeping more pretty much. And you went through some of the reasons why. Do you think that we should all be napping more? Do you take cat naps?
So I don't nap. I think so. There's so many extremes of what I read about on a day-to-day basis, or I should say domains that are super specific that I think there's a lack of consensus on. Napping is a really tough one. I try to stay up to date on kind of like the cutting edge beliefs on the efficacy of napping. Some people, they nap naturally. Others, they can't nap at all. I find myself on the can't nap at all part of the spectrum. But a lot of people swear by like a post-lunch nap. I mean, historically, it's been, patrician to take a siesta. So there's definitely something there. I think it depends, honestly, on the genes you've inherited. Like the scientists that I mentioned in the video, Mendeleev, who, made the periodic table of elements, and Edison, they were, leveraging the very peculiar nature of dream sleep because it engages the subconscious. And while if you can access your dreams, you're effectively able in a way to access your subconscious, which I think is like a very small, like esoteric realm of napping. I don't think, honestly, the science is good enough to say if you should or shouldn't be napping. I mean, I would think that you should probably just get all your sleep in one go while it's dark out. That seems most logical to me.
Did he just take 20-minute naps?
Yeah. I mean, Edison's naps were very short, and he would deliberately interrupt them by having ball bearings in his hand. So like after a little bit of sleep, the ball bearings would fall out and he would force himself up. Like he didn't want his naps to extend from like the beginning phase of sleep, which is REM or dream sleep, into dream sleep. He wanted to always stop. I mean, into deep sleep. He wanted to always stop before deep sleep. And like whatever he was dreaming about, it probably would have reflected whatever problem he was working on at the time. And so he would wake up immediately and he'd try to access everything in that dream. I mean, it was incredibly dialed. The man was unbelievable.
I can take like 10 to 20-minute naps during a lunch break. I have
Really?
a lunch break. And I can just go in, take the nap, make myself wake up and go outside, walk my dog, and then like get back into work. And I feel like it really does. If you can get past the grogginess you feel for about 10 minutes and like make yourself get outside, and that it really does help me kind of like refresh and like take some of that stress away that I was having and kind of be able to implement my ideas easier.
I mean, I'm sure that like that's so foreign to me, but if like the way I see it, like we're going to talk about this later, I'm sure like there's so much scientific shit out there for you to consume, but your body is telling you that this nap works for you. And so I think you got to listen to that. Like your ancestors probably napped as well and it worked for them. And now it's working for you. So you're leaning into it. I think a lot of people should try to be more intuitive about what their physical needs are. Like I feel the complete opposite, like to just take myself out of an active day and go to sleep. Like, maybe it's like a lack of calmness of mind, but I'm just not sure. I don't think I could do that. I like to just be like running, grinding from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. And when I go to sleep, I like to just be out for like 9-10 hours.
Do you ever meditate?
Yeah, I meditate for sure. But I don't know if, there's a big gap between sort of the consciousness of meditation and the consciousness of actual sleep. I think I have trouble sleeping, whereas I don't have trouble meditating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, so that I wanted to bring this up and we can kind of jump into that. Cause it's something that I think about a lot. Sometimes I'll go through these periods where I'm all about the research and I'm on, Google Scholar and I'm trying to read every paper about melatonin supplementation and something recently. Right. And you can kind of start to freak yourself out. Sometimes it seems like to me that whatever stance you want to take, you can find data to back it up.
100%.
And so, yeah, I mean, you brought it up and I think there's, I don't know, in certain circles, it's like you have to have, empirical data and controlled trials and, randomized controlled trials to back up your claims. But sometimes it's like, to me, how are you going to tell me that by my subjective experience, I'm feeling great doing this, that it's wrong, that it's bad for me, Sometimes I struggle with that. So it's yeah. What how do you find a balance between because I know from your videos, I mean, you do bring data into it, but you also bring a lot of subjective experience into it. How do you find a balance there?
Yeah, so I think this can drive people crazy, and I think it does. I think like the dizzying array of advice and science and what's the right thing to do just forces people into inaction, right? They're like, I'd rather just not deal with any of this than do the wrong thing. And I think it can be tricky. I do try to read everything on the cutting edge of the things I'm interested in. But at a certain point, like the scientific studies are in a way just as dubious as like your anecdotal experience, right? Because like, so for example, when the food pyramid came out, when I was a kid, I was told to eat like all of these carbs. It's like the most important part of the food pyramid, right? And the reason we had that food pyramid was because there was scientific evidence that suggested that we should be eating carbs. But if we look at, who funded that scientific evidence, it was like a whole bunch of lobbies, right? So it always gets tricky. I would say you should, if you're curious about these things, about the scientific backing, you should lean into books. Those people that wrote those books, they probably are pretty invested. They have a specific domain they've specialized in that they've committed their lives to. I think that should be where you're consuming from, as opposed to like little sound bites or headlines on Reddit or Twitter. For example, my sleep video was, corroborated by Matthew Walker. He's, the expert on sleep. He spends his life on just sleep. Like, I would say that I should probably outsource my sleep knowledge to someone like that. Now, on the other side of the coin, with this dizzying array of shit out there to consume, I think people can just like be forced into inaction. They're like, I have all of these specific scenarios and situations, whether like we're talking exercise or nutrition or, social media or dealing with my relationships. Like, I need to know something domain specific about all these scenarios in order to act in all these scenarios. And they're like, I can't keep all this stuff in my mind. I don't have time to collect all of these rules and, guidebooks for every single scenario. So what I think you ought to lean into is kind of a mental model or a first principle for something like health that across scenarios gives you a blueprint for how to act. And what I mean by that is, I would say what underpins more than anything Ragsdale health philosophy is this idea of ancestral or primal health. If you're in doubt about how to act in a given situation, ask yourself the question, would my ancestors have done this thing or would they have not done this thing? As humans, we live in a new architecture now, right? We don't have to survive. So in a lot of ways, like you don't have to, you don't have to succumb to like the determinism of your genes, but we still have the genes, right? We still have the genes, and you can't be so arrogant as to ignore that. So like, for example, if you're like, what should I eat? What should my diet be? Like, I don't know. Like, these people say fats are bad. These people say carbs are bad. These people say the Mediterranean diet is right. Well, like, look at what your ancestors did. Like, pre-agricultural revolution, we didn't eat any carbs. So we probably have genes that carbs are bad for. We ate meats, right? We ate meats and we ate some plants. So you should probably do that thing. Should I exercise or should I not exercise? You should probably exercise. What type of exercise should I do? Should I, get on the Peloton and ride for 2 hours? Like, did hunter-gatherers have Pelotons at the road for 2 hours? No. You should probably go sprint or carry some boulders or, climb a tree. So if you use that mental model, I think it can sort of make that horrible chaos a little bit simpler, where you don't have to go consume everything in the world and read every study. Just, would my ancestors have done this thing? If yes, do. If no, don't do.
Yeah.
And you don't have to spend hundreds of dollars every month on getting the right supplement.
Exactly.
Or the right wrap on your belly to make you lose weight.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to do any of that stuff. Like, actually, the supplementation industry, like, it's become the norm that people just supplement now, just like across the board. Like, what supplements should I be taking? Yeah. And I'm just like, like, maybe this is a good thing, but like, it's probably not.
Yeah. You don't need it. Right. I mean,
no.
I think supplements is like maybe 1% of what they should be worried about. There's people who are getting 5 hours of sleep and going, what's the best essential amino acids? It's like, dude,
Exactly.
you're kind of, you're stepping over $100 bill to pick up a nickel, as you know.
A whole issue with the supplement industry is that they're not required to follow like FDA guidelines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Like
that's
tested and stuff. So a lot of times they can like say there's a certain amount of something in there, but they're not like third party testing and making sure. And so a lot of times you may just be buying.
They can do the proprietary blend.
Yeah.
And they don't even have to say how much of anything's in there.
Mm-hmm. Like
those formula. So
he actually
the mess.
Sometimes those Bang energy drinks that have like creatine.
Oh, Bang. Yeah.
This is alleged, but I think I heard in an article that they like tested some and there was like hardly any creatine at all in it that would actually help you.
Yeah, there was.
I believe it.
There wasn't enough to be effective dose.
So there is like something like you can kind of just market however you want,
I think on that note, like there's another interesting dynamic, which, like I'm a cynical bastard, so I look for these things all the time. But like with the supplement industry, like there's a lot of money to be made peddling supplements, right? Like if you convince someone that, I don't know, like creatine's actually, I think on the good end of it, but let's take something like, a glycine. If you convince people they need glycine, there's a ton of money to be made, like especially via social media channels. Like you can make bank. So if you're looking at like a recommendation, a health recommendation, look behind it to see what the monetary incentives are for who. This is why fasting has not entered the vernacular, because no one can make money from people eating less things.
Yeah. And less often, right? Yeah.
No, there's no money to be made there. So like
Except me, I'm I'm so dumb that I bought an ebook for fasting.
Well, that's actually good.
It actually was the lady who
I actually thought it was good.
The lady who had it has her like master's in nutrition, and it was a very well done book. It had all these like recipes, and I had to do like a 7-day detox to kind of like prepare myself, pretty much get all the sugars out of my system. And so she had like,
but it wasn't like one of these detox, like it was just eating a whole food balanced diet leading up to beginning your fast.
Yeah. She wasn't making me take like diarrhea supplements.
Drink your diarrhea tea. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny how that's called the detox now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I was going to ask about, you kind of spoke about your diet doing, it sounds like a lower carb, whole food diet. Not necessarily like shooting for ketosis all the time, maybe having a higher protein intake, and vegetables and stuff. But I wanted to ask about, what about with fasting? I think you kind of touched on it. Are you doing like an intermittent fasting thing every day? And how often are you doing, prolonged fasts?
Yeah, so I intermittent fast pretty much every day to varying degrees. My body's just so used to it that it's nice to not have to think about the institution of food and beverage until like 2. It's also like, realistically, I'm as vapid as anyone else. It helps me, stay pretty fit. But I actually think that aspect of fasting, like, pales in importance to periodic fasting. Periodic fasting to me is like anything, 36 hours or beyond. Like if you're doing 36, 48, 48 hour, 3-day fasts, you do get to the point where, your body is relying on its own fat storage for energy. And once you get to that stage, the body prompts this cellular recycling process called autophagy, where basically senescent cells, like the older fellas that are just hanging around because you're feeding them glucose on such a regular basis, they die, and they die real quick. And the biomatter gets recycled and rechanneled into the younger lads who are going to help you operate more effectively. That does not happen, and it will not happen if you're routinely feeding yourself. This is a bodily process that's been, refined over millions of years that our bodies have internally that the vast majority of people are not unleashing. So I do periodic fast. It's either 3 days once a month for 2 days every 2 weeks. I think that's where the true beauty of fasting comes in. Again, I think your motivations for fasting are largely secondary, whether you just want to stay fit or whether you're trying to access the cellular recycling. If you do it well, you're still getting the end product. But I hope as kind of we continue, the fasting vernacular shifts from intermittent fasting for weight loss to like periodic fasting for autophagy. And for longevity, it's anti-aging if you do it more seriously.
Yeah, there's some research too. I mean, I don't think they're sure of it yet, but there's some research that points to the autophagy can help like with because essentially isn't that kind of what cancer is all of these like dead cells that aren't doing anything. And then so autophagy they're thinking, at least in rats, it like helped like get rid of these cells that are like not working.
Yeah, I think that's right on. I mean, the cancer at its core is like uncontrolled cell multiplication, but the cells have mutated, right? They have mutated to an extent. And so if the body is carrying out a process where it's cleaning out unwanted cells, I can imagine a scenario where those cancer cells are nipped in the bud. On top of that, cancer feeds on glucose. And so if you're at the autophagic stage already, you're at the stage where there's no blood glucose left, right? And so if there's no blood glucose left, then I don't know what cancer is feeding on at that point. I mean, I don't know anything about that realm, but I do know that cancer needs sugar to proliferate.
That's really interesting. And can you speak to kind of your process in fasting? Do you consume coffee, water, electrolytes, bone broth? I know there's a lot of, some people, and you talked about this in your video, it doesn't even necessarily have to be absolutely no food or beverage.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people consume a little bit of fat, maybe even.
Can
you kind of speak to what your process looks like going into a fast?
Yeah, no, I think you kind of said it. I don't think there's much more to say beyond that. I'm not like really that strict about the fast. The strict part is like no sugar is allowed in the bites for that fast. Like have some espresso, have some creatine, tea, have a little bit of protein, have a little bit of fats. Like the point is to be like at a notable caloric deficit with no glucose for a prolonged period. So that's what I try to reflect. And like there are some really good times for fast. For example, like I flew back from Istanbul yesterday, and like airplane and airport food is an absolute nightmare for the human body. Like it's just like filled with preservatives, processed food. Like God knows how long it's been in the icebox. So that's just like a great time to throw in a fast. Like I just fasted for 36 hours through my flight,
Yeah.
So I try to like find natural, points in the week where it sort of fits. Like if you got a big dinner on Friday, like with like your mom and dad, like you probably shouldn't just like sit there and stare at them while you're fasting, right? So like maybe Wednesday, Thursday you fast, and then Friday you come back for the feeding. I just try to make sure to do it on a daily basis. Like you can see yourself getting complacent too. If like you're eating regularly and then you try to go into a fast, oh God, I really wish I could just like have a burrito right now. So if you're doing it more regularly, it's not such a shock to the system.
That takes some real strength to fast during flying, because I fast often. And when I fly, I'm just like, give me anything to make me feel better because I'm sick of it.
Funny story, actually. So when we flew to California recently, I was thinking, hey, I'm gonna fast, right? And so we stopped in I think it was Houston or Dallas Fort Worth Airport, right? And Shani got some like keto stuff, burger, and I got some sparkling water and a large black coffee, and I brought potassium chloride and some iodized sea salt. And so first of all, they stopped me in the airport, and they took like 20 minutes, and they like checked, they put the powder out, and we're doing all these checks on it. They thought I brought like, kilo Coke with me right in my backpack.
They saw Sam's tattoos and his skateboard that he was carrying on the plane, and they're like, we got this guy.
I was like, man, I don't
he's done.
Drink, dude, But so that happened, and then we were on the plane, and I opened one of these fresh sparkling waters, Topo Chico. I don't know if you ever had it, but and I started pouring a little bit of salt in it, and that motherfucker just shot up so much. Started spraying all over the plane. Shit, it was funny, man.
That's absurd. It's like a.
Do you take electrolytes when you fast ever? Salt and potassium, magnesium.
I do the salt, but that's about all I do. I gotta look more into the electrolyte while fasting realm. But yeah, I do the salt. So, Sam, what do you find kind of the difference between fasting on and off the electrolytes is?
So when I did this recent one, I tried to go for 100 hours because it sounded good, but I ended up making it about 70. So about 3 days. There was points in that where I was having like heart palpitations and feeling like extremely low energy, really, it wasn't even like I was feeling hungry, but I was like, something is up with my body right now and I need to eat something. And when I would do this would happen a couple of the mornings. And when I did the electrolytes, it like completely went away and I felt fine. And so I know, and Shani and I will sometimes, if we do like a 1 meal a day thing, or even just for, a traditional 16-8 or 18-6 intermittent fasting, we'll sometimes do the electrolytes in the morning. And, I'm going to sound stupid here, but there's something to do with potassium specifically. I think it binds to the same like receptors as glucose. So it actually can, like, in this really, it almost feels magical way, curb hunger when you're fasting. So it wasn't that long ago, the first time I ever tried it. And I did a little bit of salt and then this potassium chloride stuff in a drink, and I drank it and I felt like rejuvenated almost instantly, wow. So it can make a pretty big difference to me.
I notice a huge difference, and maybe it's just because I've drank more water during the day, but like when I start my morning and I notice so much more hunger when I don't do the potassium, and maybe it's just in my head, but it really seems like it. But the key is don't buy like the electrolyte supplements because they like upcharge them.
Yeah.
And they don't have that much in them. And you can actually buy, it's called like no salt, and it's just straight potassium. And you can just
it's like a salt substitute.
It's so much cheaper than like trying to get the health electrolyte brand of the same exact thing.
And
interesting.
Honestly, that's something that I've just been tracking lately is my potassium intake. It sounds funny, but the like recommended daily allowance for potassium is like 4,700 milligrams. It's actually quite a bit of potassium. And I have been feeling better when I try to meet that. It's in a lot of different foods, but I know there's a lot in like sweet potatoes, bananas, and then some other, I think maybe some cruciferous vegetables. I think spinach has it, but
do meats have it?
I think meat has a little bit of it too. Yeah. Cause but
I think meat actually has nearly every essential nutrient and vitamin that we need. I mean, if you look at, for example, like a big evidence against intake of carbs is like, if you look at the rate of disease in Inuits, right? In Inuit country, nothing grows, especially not any carbs. They eat like seal blubber and that's it. And their rates of disease are like at all-time lows. So I think like there's a lot of people like Paul Saladino, the carnivore MD, these guys who are like pure carnivore goblins that claim that everything that we need as humans is found in red meat. So I wouldn't be surprised if potassium is in red meat. It's like it's interesting that you guys say that it is that you feel more satiated and less like miserable and hungry when you have electrolytes in the pipes for the fasting. Like I think about again, getting back to like what our ancestors would have been doing. Like, we have like shit to do. Like we have jobs and we have to keep our energy high. Like we have cognitive tasks to focus on. So like maybe the electrolytes are like the addition to the fasting that makes it more sustainable and reasonable to integrate into your daily life. Like a hunter-gatherer is definitely not supplementing with salt.
Right?
Or potassium.
They did say that some animals will go and lick a rock or something.
No, it's like the gallbladder in deer and some ruminant animals. Like it has an extreme amount of sodium and potassium. And I think Paul Saladino's actually talked about it. Certain organs of animals are really, really high in sodium and potassium. And then also, this isn't as much of like an ancestral view, but, you know, I don't know how true this is, but in like ancient Egypt, you always hear that salt was like worth its weight in gold, right? That like salt was this really sought after resource. And I think that's part of it is, you know, people can cross the desert without food or even much water maybe, and having that salt, you know, it helps retain the water in your body and stuff. And
that's interesting.
I think about it with
hear that animals will walk to go lick minerals of the earth to get their micronutrients.
Yeah, because it occurs in yeah. That's interesting.
Like animals are just like lick rocks and whatever salty substance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's really interesting.
You know the gallbladder thing is actually also interesting. Like I wonder if, like, we'll probably get into feast and famine at some point. Like once you found the kill as, you know, a hunter gatherer, you would eat the animal from nose to tail, right, including the gallbladder, which may have been, you know, jacked to the gills with potassium. But you take in like a preposterous amount of potassium all at once, right? It's not routine small intake of potassium over time. And like we have all these like recommended daily value of nutrients and vitamins, which realistically is probably not optimizing your performance or your health. Like if you eat an entire gallbladder, it's probably like 900,000 times your daily intake. But that's probably better. Like again, the body adjusts to that stress probably in a pretty decent way.
Yeah. So that's something me, you and Chris were talking about it, where it's like, I started to buy into a lot of these bodybuilder guys I was listening to where they're like, oh, you need to have, you know, 5 protein feedings a day or 3 to 5 protein feedings a day to optimize muscle protein synthesis. But when I looked at the research, it's all with like rats and whey protein, and not all of it, but it's like, that's most of it. Right. And so I think about it again, like this evolutionary perspective where, you might be hunting an animal for 2 days, 3 days without, you know, and you're just running, maybe drink out of the river and you're zoned in on catching this thing. And then you get it and you eat, 500 grams of protein with your tribe or whatever. It's not like that I just feel like that can't be that much worse or that much different than 5 whey protein shakes throughout the day. It just wouldn't make sense to me that like a whole food animal protein source takes a little bit longer to break down and assimilate into your muscles. But
no, dude, I think that's exactly right. I also think like you got to look at those, like what are those bodybuilders optimizing for? They're optimizing to be as massive as humanly possible, right, and as cut as humanly possible, right? Like there's probably a divergence. Which is not
healthy.
No, exactly. That's exactly the problem. Like they're not optimizing necessarily for health. Like, we know as a fact, it's not ancestral or healthy to eat 5 little meals a day. That's an experiment. Like that's an experiment that started like 10 years ago, right? Like the burden
of not healthy to be 5% body fat, which is like what some of these people are trying to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Or for women, like 12%. Like some of these women like lose their periods when they do these fitness things, which means they can't birth children. Like that's not what we want for our health, you know?
Well, people will have you believe that like if you're doing OMAD or
get jammed up, you're saying?
Yeah. So basically I was saying, I look at people like you and there's this guy online, Thomas DeLauer, who he's really into, he's like, 15 years on keto and he's into prolonged fasting, intermittent fasting. And he tries a lot of these, maybe unorthodox to the whole like food pyramid, 5 round meals a day, right? He does kind of the opposite of that. And the guy is in like incredible shape and doesn't, he doesn't take steroids or anything. And so, and he talks about the research. There's some research about fasting and keto and stuff, but, he always talks about how it's like, he trusts his personal experience with it. And I think it's pretty valid. I mean,
well, yeah. And he used to be overweight.
Yeah. He's like, he lost like 100 pounds, but I love the, ancestral evolutionary perspective on things like you do. So I think it's just really cool that Ragsdale Health is, that's kind of the foundation of it. I think that's wonderful.
I think it just helps. Like I think it just helps people to have like that operating principle that like you can just apply across the board. Like, and it goes way beyond health, right? Like, I don't know, like we were talking earlier about how, like you guys are talking about how, like anxiety and depression is such a problem in the developed world, right? And then I think if you look at something like the fact that it's disproportionately skewed towards young women, and then you're like, all right, well, why would anxiety and depression be disproportionately skewed towards young women? Think about the difference between women and men. Women are more inclined to be social, right? They had to be concerned with what other people thought about them in the tribes. The men were out hunting, and the women were responsible for maintaining, a social status in the tribes. So if you assume that, women are more sensitive to what other people think about, managing perception, and then you throw in, the hyper socialization of social media into the mix, like you have your tribal architecture, and then here's social media, which multiplies that times 100,000. Like if you look at primal principles, your genes are not equipped for that. So like stage 1 and 2, if you're anxious or depressed, start exercising and unplug from social media, and then see where that leads you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. How do you motivate your clients, whether it be, on their diet or their exercise routine?
That's a good one. I think like, what I generally do is I try to encourage them to visualize a future state in which their quality of life is much higher than it is today. And it's pretty much guaranteed to be, right? Like it's scary to tell people like about all the downsides of exercising, and loss can be sometimes a bigger motivator than gain. But I tend to find it more sustainable and healthy to be like, look, I mean, especially, so for example, if they're older, right? Like people are like, I really, I don't think I should be doing muscle building. Like I'm pretty brittle. And then you make the argument, well, if you don't, expose your body to weights, you're going to have trouble maintaining bone density. And bone density is critical to like maintaining youthfulness and agility into old age. And that allows you to spend more time with your loved ones. So like when you phrase it like that, like if you do this thing, you're going to have more high quality years with your loved ones. That's like a pretty appealing pitch across the board. Another tricky thing, which I'm sure we will, foray into shortly, is like people get intimidated by the gym. They get intimidated by working out. And we've talked a little bit about how, the dizzying array of information can be synthesized by like a very simple operating principle. But I think another thing is like, you're intimidated because you think people are judging you, right? People are like, oh, look at this moron amateur starting their time in the gym. But like, think about, how obsessed we all are, like with our own day-to-day and our own insecurities, and we're inside our own heads all day. Like, do you notice the guy at the gas station who like dropped the nozzle, or like the guy at the gym who like went for the 15-pound weight instead of the 20? Like, no, we're like obsessed with ourselves. We have a spotlight on ourselves all the time. Literally no one cares about you, which can be kind of freeing in a way. Like if you're in the gym, no one's paying attention to you. Like, dude, just do your thing and grind. And on top of that, I wonder if you guys feel similarly. Like, I feel like the people in like the realm of activity, people are like getting after it, exercising, doing diet. Like they want everyone in here. Like they want the whole world in here, and in their cave of gains. It's not like a zero-sum game. We're not out here to say like, I can make gains and I'm gonna take the gains away from you. It's like, yeah, we all want to lift each other. We want everyone to be happier and spend more time with their loved ones, have high quality of life. So I think when you put it into perspective that it's all upside, and everyone who's ever learned anything and mastered anything looked like a fool at the beginning. It's part of the process of getting better.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
I love what you said about not like we get in our head that everyone's watching us at the gym, but really everyone's like looking in the mirror, looking at themselves, or
totally.
Everyone's thinking about, oh my God, do people see me just do that? Like they're so wrapped up in themselves.
Exactly.
And a lot of like girls I know, they're like, I'm scared because I don't know how to like work the machines and stuff. And I'm like, I remind them like, there are so many men in there that like would love the opportunity to mansplain you how to work that machine and show you how. Like, do not be worried of looking stupid or asking questions, because they love that.
That's actually so funny. That reminds me, yesterday I saw, there was a post on Twitter, like some like pretty attractive girl who has a pretty big following on Twitter, like put up a Twitter post, like, or put in their Tinder profile that like, I just need someone to explain Bitcoin to me. And then just like her inbox just gets flooded with dudes trying to mansplain Bitcoin to
her. Oh, that's great. That's so good. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love how you phrase that with Jim. I really like the visualization of a future state with higher quality life, I think is how you put it. I mean, that's just, it's really well said. Something that we haven't touched on that much. So we kind of touched on sleep and fasting, which were two of the sunrise chats. And so for anybody who's listening, if you follow TJ on Instagram, it's Ragsdale Health. We'll put the link in the description, but he does these sunrise chats that are, 5 to 10 minute talks about a subject that subject around health and ways to improve your life. So he's done one on sleep. He's done one on fasting. We talked about that. Now, what about the cold and heat exposure? I think that one, is probably even, there's probably less awareness around that even than the sleep and the fasting.
Definitely the hottest take in the mix. I think you're right. Like fasting is entering the vernacular, but it's still like pretty young. Cold and heat exposure is like an infant in comparison. Yeah. But I think it's the same kind of idea. I don't know if you guys have heard of Wim Hof. You heard of Wim Hof, the Iceman?
Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the Iceman's philosophy, which I think is good, and it fits into this sort of like ancestral operating principle, is, our bodies were, they were equipped for insane environmental stress. When the winter would come around, you're not hopping into your climate controlled home, with hot water and like a nice big, down coat, right? Like a lot of the time you're exposing yourself to frigid temperatures, or, if you're a hunter gatherer in the Sahara, you're dealing with 110 degrees Fahrenheit for like 100 days straight. And so we don't expose ourselves to those extremes anymore. We live in a narrow temperature band. The reality of the situation is, when you live in that narrow temperature band, when you exclude the extremes, there are cells in the body that are there to equip you for those extremes that will atrophy. They're not being used. They're just going to disappear. And so like a key place where that is present is like your cardiovascular system. Like it's going to get less efficient if you don't expose it to stressors. There'll be capillaries or vessels, or again, this is a subject I don't know enough about, but that will erode, that will no longer, need to play a role. So what cold exposure can do is it can ensure that, the body is being exposed to those extremes. It's rebuilding those connections that would have atrophied by virtue of kind of like, the moderation, the temperateness of society. I also think like, cold exposure, like cold showers have sort of entered the vernacular. Like it's a fantastic, tangible way you can work on your discipline. Like if you feel like lost and you're at the whims of like, short-term pleasures, and you're like, I really want to just get grounded and get back on the right track. If you can start your day off, especially in the winter when it's cold as shit, like it was 25 degrees this morning. I got up, I hopped in the cold shower. You start your day off with like a challenge like that, like you're good to go. You can defeat that. You can defeat that day, Also, like, again, getting back to the anxiety and depression, I think this is more of a hot take of mine, but like at its core, I think anxiety is, a constant barrage of intrusive thoughts that you can't escape. And whether those are coming from like, a place of social perception or somewhere else, like it's a fundamental lack of presence. You're somewhere else. You're thinking about something else instead of being here in this activity. If you jump into a cold lake, you're not thinking about shit. You're surviving. You're right there in that lake, fighting to stay warm. You're boom. You're just there. And it's really pretty incredible. And even there's an afterglow. It's kind of like the afterglow of like an LSD. Like that experience isn't just relevant in that moment. It carries with you into that day. If you're starting your day off with a cold plunge, it can really transform your shit. It's painful. It's painful. It's tough. It takes grit, but you're going to be so thrilled and proud of yourself if you can put yourself through it.
Oh man.
I do think there is some data that, I think it was on an episode of Joe Rogan and Rhonda Patrick, that they've seen some things that look promising, that it does help with like depression, anxiety, like cold showers, hot showers. And I notice a huge difference. I take like a hot bath, so hot that it's like almost uncomfortable. And it like makes me breathe deeper and slower. And it really does reset my whole mindset. So I love that, like implementing these things that are just so easy to implement, but they do take discipline, obviously. And they don't cost any money for anyone.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
That is a good point. Super simple, cheap stuff. Like there's a difference between simple and easy. Like a cold plunge is not easy, but it's very simple. You just gotta walk your feet into, the cold shower. But it's like up here, it's as difficult as it gets. But you're right. Like these are things that are so impactful, but so cheap, just like fasting.
Yeah. I mean, I can't agree more with what you said about the cold showers in the morning. And because I remember in college you doing this and everybody thinking like, dude, TJ's so crazy with his discipline stuff and the cold showers. So that must have been like 6 or 7 years ago when I remember you doing the cold showers. And I remember I reached out to you recently because around my birthday, so it's almost been 4 months now, I've been doing the cold showers. I've taken a couple hot ones to help when I shave, just because the hair. But I've started to look forward to the cold showers, man, because I just couldn't agree more with all the ways you put it. And, I did try to look into research and there's some stuff out there, but like I always tell people, for me, it's so much of it it's the quickest, like instant cure to a feeling of depression or something. I mean, I love the way you put it because it forces you to be grounded. I mean, I can sit there and meditate for 20 minutes and my mind it's going to wander, right? And that's part of it. But my mind can't wander in a freezing cold shower. And now that the weather's gotten, so for the past few months, I was like, oh, I'm doing the cold showers and I got this. But once the temperature dropped, that water's way colder than it has been, And, so it's tough, man. I couldn't agree more. It's like if you can, I kind of have a mantra where I go in there, I'm like, it's not going to hurt me. It's not going to hurt me. And I just walk in there and it definitely makes a difference to me throughout the day. It's like, maybe I'm afraid to try to make a certain pitch at work, or I'm hesitating to call somebody about this or communicate a certain point. And, having done that in the morning makes a huge difference. So I'm a big proponent. And now I kind of look forward to them, honestly, after like I'm really into skateboarding and I'll skate for an hour and my heart rate gets jacked up, my body temperature, I'm sweating. Then I hop in that cold shower and it's just, it's honestly, I would also compare it to, a psychedelic, or it feels like a drug, it does. Yeah.
Dude, also on that, like the cold shower can be incredibly intimidating because it's like, it's kind of like exercise, right? Like we have like this socializing and work domain over here, and then you got exercise over here, right? Whereas you have your normal life over here, and then you have like cold shower, cold exposure time over here. It's like this separation of domains. Whereas like I think another maybe like more approachable way for people that, I don't know, they don't necessarily have the grit to hop in a cold shower during the winter, is like break down the barriers between these like separate states. So like if you're going out for a walk, it's 45 degrees out, like leave the jacket at home, pop some shorts on, right? Go for a 45-minute walk, see how you do. Like just integrate these health principles like into your daily life, like more casually over time. It's like, like weaning off a drug. Like you don't just go cold turkey, because then, your body, it goes into spasms. You do it slowly. I think one more interesting thing about the cold shower, like you mentioned, As it got colder, you're like, oh damn, like this is brutal doing this now. Like in the summer, you're like, I could do cold showers for the rest of my life. This is light work. And then the winter comes around, you get up, the sun's not even up, and you got to go get in the cold shower. You're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
but I find something fascinating happens when, like this morning, my mind almost tricked me to take a hot shower. And it came up with all of these fascinating explanations and justifications for why I shouldn't be taking the cold shower just this morning. It's not that I'm weak. It's all of this. It's all of these circumstantial things. This is why you should take a hot shower this morning. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, this is an incredible thing. My mind is creating these wild justifications for getting out of a hard behavior. And then you just tell yourself not to be frail and you get in that shower. But you realize that when you force yourself to do shit like that, the mind is constantly working in the background to protect the ego and evade responsibility. And you got to step into that position of just grinding right through it and realizing when your mind is protecting your ego.
Wow. Yeah. That is, that's profound, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because a lot of the things you're talking about, implementing cold showers, fasting, if you go and tell your grandma this, she's like, if you walk out of the house wearing shorts in the winter, she's like, get a jacket on, you're going to catch a cold. And I told my grandma about fasting and she was just like, skipping breakfast? That's so bad for you. And people that have never tried any of these things will tell you a million reasons why it's horrible for you. Like when Sam was on the carnivore diet, he has had people that are overweight, don't step into the gym, don't eat healthy, probably eat donuts for breakfast, tell him that him doing a steak diet is so unhealthy and horrible and he should not do it. And it's like, wait, you're giving him health advice? And then I
lost 40 pounds and they're still.
And so it is crazy that without even trying to do it, just someone talking about it, us as humans can make 50 reasons why I should never try that.
Yeah. It's funny, man. Someone at work, there was a point where I was really into the Monster energy drinks, which I'm not saying are healthy by any means but I was having 4 of these drinks a day, which is 1,200 milligrams of caffeine 800 milligrams of caffeine. It's a lot of caffeine, right? And, but I was having this person at work tell me, oh my God, you're drinking way too many. I'm worried you're going to overdose on caffeine. That's a thing, and they're eating chips and Snickers bars every day, and they're telling me, oh, I'm worried you're going to die from too much caffeine. It's like, man, it's hard for me to kind of just, that's when the stoicism comes in. It's like, okay. All right. But yeah.
And smoking cigarettes too, right?
Oh yeah. And then, people who are just massive binge drinkers and doing other substances were telling me, hey man, that vape is going to kill you, man. Do you all right, man. Again, I know it's not good for me, but,
also using someone's physical look as a heuristic for their domain expertise. When I went in for hernia surgery about 2 years ago, which by the way, I also regret getting surgery, but I went in there and the first doctor to see me, he was obese, and I was like, I respect that you went through all these years of medical school, but what about your training led you to believe that you being this weight is acceptable?
Yeah.
Now you're giving me medical advice. It just seems very odd to be doing.
Why do you regret getting hernia surgery? Is there a way to even handle that naturally?
Well, again, I'm super cynical, but I feel like with something like hernia surgery, it's teetering on the border of elective surgery, right? If you have a hernia and, the intestine has dipped through the abdominal wall, for sure, the only way you're going to back out of that is surgery. But, I look at the incentives and the vested interests of the medical industry, and my cynical mind takes me all the way back to the beginning. And, if I was looking at my MRI or my scan, I wouldn't know what a hernia looked like. If there was a small bulge, they could have attributed it to being a hernia and then demanded that I need surgery. And then I get the surgery, and everyone in the process is, 50 grand richer and I'm 50 grand poorer. What I would have preferred to do, and kind of what I try to encourage clients to do, is work balls out on preventative, so you don't ever have to enter the medical establishment where the incentives are all screwed anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The carnivore doctor, what's his name?
Sean Baker.
He used to give back surgeries, and he started implementing, healthy food.
I think he was joints, like knees and stuff mainly.
Oh, okay. Knee surgery. He started implementing healthy food, exercise, and a lot of these things. And being an actual good doctor with accountability, and when someone had issues, he'd implement those things. And a lot of times they wouldn't need the surgery anymore. And so he got punished for that because what he was doing was losing money.
He got kind of blackballed, and he was putting people on ketogenic diets. And the hospital started making less money, and he got kind of blackballed for it. And, I want to say, about the ketogenic diets, it's such a good way where you don't have to track your food and weigh out your food. And, it's a natural appetite suppressant, I think, is part of the reason that it works so well for people. And, our modern food environment is so filled with foods that are low in protein and high in fats and carbs and processed and, extremely palatable and stuff. And that to me is so much more of that to me is the issue, right? It's yes, people are eating too many calories, yes, you can eat carbs, you can eat fruit, you can eat meat and lose weight. It doesn't really matter. But just that our food environment is full of these calorically dense foods that are hyper palatable and available at any time, right? You could drive through McDonald's, pick up a meal of 3,000 calories and eat it in 5 minutes, I think that the ketogenic diet does a good way of kind of self-regulating. I think that's why you like it. I mean, you used to do kind of like a bodybuilding style diet, right? Like chicken, rice, and broccoli and 5 meals throughout the day. But now it's much more intuitive. Yeah. It's just much more intuitive. And I think that's kind of what Sean Baker experiences. He introduced people to this, and they immediately began to shed body fat, and the health markers improved, and they didn't need knee surgery. Right. And that's why it can seem magical to some people, is because it's so natural to, eat the right amount when you're not eating carbs.
I think keto. I mean, keto has largely been, I think, a fantastic development for people. The success of keto sort of brings me back to the idea of having, operating principles that you're working with, but then you test them out in your real life, and if they work for you, you keep doing them. Let's say you take two opposing health views. One that calories in, calories out dictates everything, right? It's the law of thermodynamics. You're going to lose weight if you eat less than your maintenance. You're going to gain weight if you eat more than your maintenance. You got that over here. And then you have over here is the idea that all calories are not created equal, right? So for the keto diet, you're skewing towards proteins and fats. But let's just say that, eating 3,000 calories of proteins and fats allows you to maintain your weight, and eating 3,000 calories where you skew towards carbs makes you put on weight, right? If you hold those two opposing views in your mind and you test both on your body, you'll know which one's correct very quickly. Mm-hmm. So for example, it's been for 50 years, law of thermodynamics, calories in, calories out has been the dogma. But you're seeing all these people eat the same amount in calories, but skew towards ketogenic foods, lose weight. So what's going on there?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's something to it for sure. And I don't know, just for me, I think in the long term, doing a low carb approach is, I right now on some days I eat higher carbs when I'm lifting. But I think in the long term, weighing out 75 grams of rice, and spiking my insulin and then being so hungry, it's not really that sustainable.
No.
if I'm being honest. Like,
yeah, it has to do with what best fits your lifestyle too and your goals. So like when I was training for Miss Illinois, I did the 6 meals a day. I was working out twice a day.
you're probably just always hungry.
I got down to like 12% body fat. I was 115 pounds and I was super,
she was jacked, dude.
I was super shredded. I was super shredded and like jacked, but not like gross jacked, like Miss Illinois stage, like sexy jacked. And, but I like, because I don't have that goal now, like my boyfriend finds me beautiful at like 20% body fat, you know, I'm not going to get up on stage in a bikini in front of people. And I also, back then I had like a completely different work schedule. I wasn't working like a full-time job, where I was like sitting behind a computer from 8 to 6 every day. And so now just eating 2 meals a day, keto, like, and not having to like freak out if I miss my workout, like just works better for my lifestyle right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it does like have to do with like what fits for you as well, I think, and what you can stick to.
I mean, it also sounds like for you, like you maintain, and this is the trick, right? Like it sounds like you maintain a healthy lifestyle pretty much around the clock. So like what you're saying is if you fuck up on one meal or you miss one workout, you know, you're going to wake up the next day and still be healthy as fuck. Right. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to constantly be monitoring everything. Like you can like lean into like the randomness of life a little bit and enjoy your human experience and not have to worry because you've done all this legwork. You're getting constant legwork. You're constantly doing the right things. So it's not such a big deal. You know, if you screw up one time, you got this massive health surplus in the bank.
I think that's really well said. And I saw you made a video about it too. It's like people will have like a cheat meal or they'll binge on 2,000 calories, which I have a huge problem with. And then the next day they'll go, I have to do 4 hours of cardio to burn it all off. Right. And in reality, it's like, if you're on a program that's supporting, you know, muscle mass, the next day you go in the gym, you could freaking hit a PR and, you know, and really provide some strong stimulus to the muscle. And, you know, over the long term, it's not going to make a big deal, right? You don't have to, you know, think about, okay, well, I better burn 10,000 calories on my, you know, 5-hour swim. I mean, so I love that it's just like, if you're living like a healthy life and you have the healthy habits in place, you don't have to be so, you know, I don't know, like nitpicky about it.
No, it doesn't.
But it is hard if you live with people. Like if I lived with my parents right now and they were like eating bad and bringing home pizza, that would be so hard. So I do really feel for people that, you know, they don't have a partner that's like necessarily on the same wavelength and stuff. So I think there's a lot to like also surrounding yourself with people that kind of have similar goals and can help you.
100%. It's much easier when someone's on your wavelength, especially when it comes to health and fitness. Like we were just saying that, you know, whatever dudes at your work were like trying to tear you down for doing the right thing. Like oftentimes when people like are attacking things you're doing right, it's because it highlights their deficits. Right. And so like, yeah, of course, like when you're with your folks and they're eating what they would normally eat and you're doing your thing, like they're gonna be like, oh, what are you doing? Like your grandma, like your grandma had no malintent. She was like, you can't fast, you can't skip breakfast because that's not what she's used to. I think usually the form it takes is people will criticize all the weird healthy shit you're doing because they don't want to admit that, you know, their lifestyle is unsustainable and pretty rancid. Usually when people are trying to tear you down, it means you're on the right track.
Yeah, oh man, yeah, that's really well said. Well, cool. I don't have any other questions. Do you have any closing remarks?
Closing remarks. I don't know if I do. This has been super fun. You know, I'm sort of hold out up here, sort of like a Thoreau up in the woods. This is my only interaction of the week.
Well, man, you gave us some great gems. So you know, maybe all the introspection is serving you well.
Yeah, man. Maybe so. It was, fantastic.
Where can people find you online?
So Ragsdale Health is my Instagram. That's kind of where I post, all my health and fitness stuff. It kind of embodies the philosophy. But other than that,
if someone wants to hire you as their trainer, what do they do? Instagram DM you or?
Yeah, you can Instagram DM me, and then I will send through sort of a scope of my practice. We'll do a consult and go from there. But yeah, best way to reach me is on Instagram. Take a look at some of the videos. Make sure the philosophy suits you. Because cold heat exposure and fasting is not for everyone, but you can integrate it. It'll upgrade your life. A few levels.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for your time, TJ. And yeah, man. Talk to you later.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for the thoughtful questions. It was good to meet you, Shannon.
Yeah, it was great to finally meet you face to face and not just creep on your Instagram.
Well, feel free to do that, though. Feel free to do that. Ad nauseam.
All right, Teach. Have a good one.
Bye.
All right, guys. See you later.
Adios.